Yo guys, what is going on? Blossom is back and welcome back to another episode of Top Drives. Now, recently in the Top Drives climate, there's been a lot of talk about RQ changes and the tokens and what happens to your car if your Ultra goes to Epic or vice versa. Well, it doesn't really help when Robin is also putting a bunch of little, tidbits all over the Top Drives. I almost call it TDO, which it is, but he's putting tidbits all over the Top Drives official server about the incoming changes to the RQ system as well. So over here, thanks to Redline for getting these pictures for me. I have some images of, what he has said in his own words. And as you can see, one main thing to talk about is every Evo increases in RQ. It's about time because every Evo is better than every Subaru. It seems that either the Subarus were too high in their RQ or the Evos were too low. And over here, we can see that every Evo is going up in RQ. We also see that the Bulldog falls 6 RQ, which is interesting. I don't know why it would fall 6 RQ. Does that mean that the Bulldog is getting a massive MRA cut? Is it going to have a similar MRA to the Zagato, for example? That is going to be pretty interesting. If the Bulldog falls in 6 RQ, then I think the best MRA Ultra might go back to the Thanos Kunsash. And then the last but not least is the last message over here. It's a pretty long message, as you see behind the Bulldog falls on the 6 RQ, so I have a different picture just for that. And as you can see over here, this is the most interesting one in my opinion. So Robin says a lot over here, and Robin is known for saying things that he makes everything sounds a lot more complicated than it actually should be. I don't know why he does this. Like, you're talking on Discord, you're not talking to a bunch of, like, I don't know, investors for Top Drives or whatever. Like, I don't know. He makes all of his messages seem a lot more confusing than they should be. Maybe it's just me being stupid, but I'm just gonna break it down to the important parts that I saw in this message. The first one is high top speed cars reduce in RQ. That's huge, actually, because high top speed cars were overinflated, and I would say that four-wheel drive cars are still overinflated, and medium ground clearance and high ground clearance cars may be slightly inflated as well. But yeah, high top speed cars are definitely overinflated in RQ. So this is huge. This basically means that all of the Aston Martins and all of the Bentleys are going to go down in RQ, especially, here's the thing, right? You are worthy of your RQ if you have a high top speed and you have the MRA to back it up. But if you don't have an MRA, let's say if you have an MRA of under, I want to say 87. If your MRA is under 87 or maybe 85 and you have a high top speed, then there's no point having that high top speed, if that makes sense. So yeah, nice to see that they're reducing an RQ. Makes sense. So expect all the Bentleys to go down. Hundreds of changes as well. So that's going to be very interesting to see. He does mention that most of these changes are going to be quite small, but let's not forget, like for example, a car going from 62 RQ to 61 is still a change. And last but not least, the manually designed their RQ. Now this one I think is a little bit concerning because the way that he states it is like, oh, the manually designed their RQ is a last resort kind of thing. It's like, if we have to, then we'll manually design the RQ. I don't know why he puts it that way. I think that you should be manually designing RQ and not leaving it to some kind of computer system, because let's be honest, you need to play the game to know the game. And you need to manually design the RQ because it shows that you also know what RQ these cars deserve. So for example, the computer might think, oh, this Bentley is RQ64 because it has the high top speed, blah blah blah. But obviously if you play the game, you would know that whatever Bentley, maybe the Bentley R Knowledge, is not deserving of RQ, I don't know, 80, not 80, 56 for example. So yeah, I think that many cars should be manually designed. If anything, I mean, Hutch has a cheat code. They can literally just look at Blossom Choice, because if anything, almost every car in Blossom Choice should be manually designed in RQ, because a lot of them are there because they have a lot of value for, a bargain price. Anyway, moving on now is I want to talk about the RQ changes. A lot of people have been asking questions about how the token system is going to work. Now, obviously nothing too official has been released from Hutch, but I want to give my best guess in the situation, okay? So let's talk about RQ changes on what I think is going to happen. Now, we've heard about the whole token system thing, and this is how I think the token system is going to work. So we'll use one example. The Lancia 037 is inevitable. It will go to Epic. No matter what happens, the Lancia 037 should go to Epic. I mean, this thing is absolutely ridiculous. For 64 RQ, you're getting 4.095. That is the same stats as a Fiat 030, which is also 64. And on top of this, the 037 Rally is also medium ground clearance and has off-road tires, whereas the 64 030 is slick tires and low ground clearance. So much more bargain coming from the 037 Rally. rally. This thing is obviously going to Epic. So what happens if your Lancia 037 goes to Epic, or any of your Ultras go to Epic for that matter? Well, I would say that you would get 1 upgrade token if the car is already upgraded, and 1 new stock Epic. That is what I think is going to be the case. So right here, let's say that my Lancia 037 is 699. Now, I know in this image, this Lancia 037 is actually 969, but let's just say it's 699. And it goes to Epic. So what I think is going to happen is that Hutch is going to provide the players with this upgrade fuse token. I mean, if you know where this actual token image is from, let me know down in the comments below, because I took that from one of my favorite movies. But yeah, you're going to get this fuse token, basically. And, you know, like I said, if the 037 is 699, your token is also going to be 699. And obviously, you don't need to carry the 15 new super rares that you need to upgrade a new ultra rare as well. It's all going to be included in the token and the cash as well. And then you're also going to get a free stock Epic. So you're going to keep your same Lancia 037 rally, but it's gonna go Epic. So that's what I think is going to be the case. That might not be the case. Who knows? Maybe the Lancia 037 might go to Epic. You might lose the Epic, and you might just keep the token. That might be possible. Like, you might not even get the Epic. You might actually just get the token. Who knows? Because in that case, it might having, you know, let's say like some players might have 14 Lancia 037 rallies. You'd be getting 14 new stock Epic. So that is basically 1 max legendary when you think about it that way. So let me know down in the comments below what you think it's going to be. Is it going to be, are they going to be really nice to us? Are they going to give us a free stock Epic and a token, or is it just going to be a token? But now we move on to the token part. So now that I have this 699 token, which I received from my Lancia 037, I can now apply it to a stock ultra rare in my garage. So for example, I have a stock Porsche 718K mod, and I want to apply my 699 token to the 718K mod. I do that, and boom, suddenly I have a 699 718K mod, free of charge, no super rares. Just apply the token, and your stock ultra rare will go upgraded to whatever the token upgrade was. So I think that this is how the token system is going to work. Now I want to talk about 3 ways to RQ balance. Well, actually, one more thing I want to mention for the token system is it's probably going to be the same value for if an Epic goes down to ultra rare, where I think that if the Epic goes down to ultra rare, you will receive a token. So in this case, it will be an Epic token. So let's say that, for example, I have, well, the best example would be the legendary going down to Epic. Let's say that I have a 2-star, and this doesn't have to necessarily work with fully upgraded. I feel like if you have a car at maybe 099 or 666, then you will get a 666 token or a 099 token. So it can get very complicated in terms of making this work without any bugs, and I would expect many bugs to show up when this feature comes into the game. But one example would be my legendary BMW, you know, the standard tire 4-wheel drive piece of crap. I currently have that, I believe, at 369. So if it goes down to mid-range Epic, which I think that's where it belongs, I would probably get a legendary 369 token, which I then can apply to any other legendary in my garage. So I think that'd be pretty nice as well. That is already confirmed in a recent Top Drive show. Maria already said that if your car is going down in RQ, you will also get a token, and if your car goes up in RQ, you will also get a token. Just it depends on what rarity that token is going to be applied for. Now I want to talk about the 3 ways to RQ balance. So there's the high standard, the low standard, and the balanced. So this is the next thing. The token part was basically what happens when your car goes up in RQ. Now I want to talk about what happens, what are the 3 options I believe Hutch has on the table to upgrade their cars in terms of RQ. So like I said, high standard, low standard, and the balance. So let's talk about that. The first one is called the high standard, as I call it. This is what happens when cars that are not worthy of their RQ go down in RQ, and cars that you think should be better and should go up in RQ actually maintain the same RQ that they have currently. So, for example, over here you have cars like, I'm going to use 4-wheel drive standard tires as an example, the Acura, Mercedes, and Citroen Metropolis. All of these 3 cars will go down in RQ. So this is in a high standard situation, in an RQ change. Let's say that Hutch decides to choose this route. Then these 3 cars, for example, will go down in RQ. Maybe the Acura goes down to 64, the Mercedes goes down to 62, the Citroen Metropolis goes down to 60. But the Legacy doesn't go up in RQ. It just stays at 64. What happens if this is the case? This is the route that Hutch chooses to choose. Then over here, as you can see, any car that is 65 plus in RQ would be better than the Legacy, right? So obviously that means that 64 RQ remains the same. Like, the Legacy BW becomes the standard for 64 RQ, because right now having the Citroen Metropolis and the Legacy BW in the same RQ doesn't make any sense. One car definitely doesn't deserve to be there. So if you move the Citroen Metropolis down to 60, then the Legacy suddenly deserves to be 64. Why I call this a high standard is because this is raising the standard for what it means to be an RQ64. And also moving cars down like the Mercedes and the Acura also raises the standard for what it means to be a 65, because that means that in order to be an RQ65 car, your stats need to be better than the Subaru Legacy. Or a 65 plus car, your stats needs to be better than the Subaru Legacy. And the Mercedes, the Acura, since they're not better than the Legacy, they're going to move below the Legacy in RQ, and they'll become RQ62 to 60 epics. I think this is a pretty good way, because cars are going to get better over time. Cars are going to handle better over time. And done are the days where cars don't come with traction control and ABS anymore. So, some cars that are lower in RQ is because they lack those two safety features, but most cars are going to have traction control and ABS. Most standard tire four-wheel drive cars are going to handle better in the future. So I think that the high standard is not a bad way to go, because that would mean that since cars are getting better and better, this actually, gives more space for higher RQ cars to fit perfectly within their RQ. Because, there are going to be better cars in the future that will perform better than the Legacy BW, and you want them to be 65 plus. You want them to be higher. If you move up the Subaru Legacy to 65, then these newer cars would become 67 or 68, and it will push everything up the spectrum, if that makes sense. And this might lead to a situation where RQ100 and RQ90 might become oversaturated with too many cars. So the high standard prevents that. It prevents the 90 and 100 RQs to be overinflated, I would say, with too many high performance cars that we might get in the future. So this is a very long-term goal. I think the high standard isn't too bad. To move, to keep the Legacy in the same place, this will basically raise the standard for RQ64, as I say once again. And of course, we'll move the Acura down and the Mercedes down, also raising the standard for 65. The next one is the low standard. Now, this is the one which I think that Hutch is going to go with, and this is probably the worst option in my opinion. This means that the Subaru Legacy goes up in RQ, and cars like the Benz, the Acura, and the Citroen Metropolis stay the same. What it means over here is that the standard for an RQ64 is actually decreased, because in the past, 64 RQ was either the Legacy or the Citroen Metropolis, either really good or really bad. But now, if you move the Legacy up and you don't move anything else down, then 64 RQ would basically be defined by cars like the Citroen Metropolis. Like, oh, okay, if it has 72 handling and 5.60 to 60, or maybe 5.80 to 60 and 75 handling, that is going to be a 64 RQ car. That's pretty bad. The Citroen Metropolis is trash RQ64, one of the worst in the game. And, having the Citroen Metropolis be one of the only, 64 RQ4 drive standards will definitely lower the standard for 64 RQ. So this is the low standard, as I call it. This would also mean that 65 RQ stays the same with these two underperforming cars, like the Mercedes and the Acura. And then the Subaru Legacy will go up to 65 plus, maybe 67 or 68 RQ. The last one I want to talk about is the balance. Now, this one I think is probably the best option for not the long term, but for the medium term, if that even makes sense. This is basically the Subaru Legacy will go up in RQ, and the Acura, Mercedes, and Citroen Metropolis will go down in RQ. What happens over here is that you have the Legacy at 65. This, the Subaru Legacy is going to be your new standard for RQ65. Your 64 RQ still, 64 RQ still goes down in value a little bit, because if you have the Subaru Legacy as your benchmark for what makes an RQ64 four-wheel drive standard tire car, that will raise the standard for RQ64 significantly. So even if you move the Legacy up to 65 and you move the Acura and Mercedes down to 64, that will lower the standard of 64 just a little bit, but not too much. And then obviously the Citroen Metropolis will go down to 61 or 62, because that car is a piece of crap. So this is the balance, and I think that this is probably, I would say, either the balance or high standard are two of the options that Hutch should go for when they come to balancing RQ in the future. Definitely the last thing I want to see is the low standard. For the Legacy to go up, but for the Benz and the Acura and the Citroen to stay the same. I think this is the worst outcome. I don't think they should do this one. The balance isn't too bad. High standard is the preferable choice, I would say, for the very long term. But then again, I guess you can argue, oh, they can go with the balance now, and maybe if they add new cars in the future, then they'll just, you know, balance it again. So yeah, I would say that the balance is not a bad option at all. So I can see that maybe the balance is probably one of the more, I would say that the high standard is probably the least likely Hutch will go for in terms of balancing RQ. I think low standard has a pretty high chance of happening, which is worrying, because I think this is the worst one. And then the last one is the balanced. I think this is the best option to go. I think that this is the best option to go. It's the most likely option to go for. So anyway, guys, that is going to be it. That is 3 ways to RQ balance: the high standard, the low standard, and the balance. And obviously, earlier on in the video, I talked about how the token system, I think, is going to work. Let me know if you have any other opinions down in the comments below, but I hope that you found this video helpful. And that is going to be it for today's informative Top Drives video. But remember to stay safe and remember to subscribe if you haven't already, as I am closing in on 10,000 subscribers. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. Remember to stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night, cruise to Jacksonville
Atlantic.
Blonde hair, don't care, look like Leslie Brooks. Pin up girls everywhere with the drop dead looks.